They called me crazy long before they called me drunk. Crazy was easier. Crazy let them laugh. Drunk let them look away. I was standing in the parking lot of St. Agnes Church when I first heard it, the whisper sliding through the open car windows like heat. That's the groom's mother-in-law. Poor thing lost her mind after the accident. Someone else added, softer but sharper, she's always got a flask. I didn't carry a flask. I carried a purse that smelled like peppermint lozenges and old paper. Inside it were things I touched when my hands shook: my late husband's ring, a photo of my daughter at 6 with a gap-toothed grin, and a folded envelope I never opened in public. I took a breath and felt the weight of the day settle into my bones. Weddings have a way of doing that, even when you're not invited to smile. My name is Margaret Hale. I am 68 years old. I have buried a husband, a sister, and a daughter. I'm not crazy, and I do not forget. The church doors were open, light spilling out in a way that made everyone look holy. Inside, the air hummed with anticipation. Outside, I watched my granddaughter, Emily, step out of a white sedan, her dress hidden beneath a garment bag, her hair pinned in a way that made her look older than 22. She was radiant. She was nervous. She did not see me at first. Emily was marrying Daniel Brooks. People like to say his name like it tasted good. Daniel Brooks. He had a smile that made pastors relax and bankers lean in. He was 35, widowed, and spoken of with the soft reverence reserved for men who had suffered tragedy. His first wife, Claire, had died 2 years earlier in a boating accident on Lake Wren. Everyone knew the story. Everyone accepted it. Everyone except me. I had known Daniel for 14 months, long enough to recognize the way his eyes moved when someone mentioned the lake. Long enough to see how his hand tightened when Emily asked about Claire. Long enough to hear the pauses in his answers, the breaths where a truth should have been. I didn't tell Emily everything. I told her enough to make her angry. "Grandma, please," she said once, her voice thin as glass. "You don't know him like I do." I watched her now as she walked toward the church, Daniel at her side. He bent his head and said something that made her laugh. The sound cut me clean through. I loved her laugh. I loved it because it sounded like her mother's. My daughter Anna would have stood right where Emily stood if she were alive. She would have smoothed her dress, rolled her shoulders, and whispered, "I'm ready," whether she was or not. Anna died 3 years ago. Officially, it was a fall, down a set of wooden stairs at a rental cabin near Lake Wren. Unofficially, it was something that never settled right in my chest. That cabin belonged to Daniel Brooks. The first time I saw him, he wore grief like a well-tailored coat. He met Anna at a fundraiser, or so he told it. They spent a weekend at the lake as friends. Claire had already died. Anna called me from the cabin, voice buzzing with excitement. "He's so kind, Mom," she said. "You'd like him?" 2 days later, I got the call. I didn't drink then, not until after the funerals, not until the house went quiet in a way that felt like a punishment. If I had a weakness, it was staying up too late with memories, replaying conversations, pressing my face into the spaces where my people used to be. I stood at the back of the church now, my hands folded, my back straight. I wore black because it felt honest. People glanced at me and then away. Someone squeezed my arm and whispered, "Try to behave today." I smiled because that's what they expected. The music started. Emily walked down the aisle. Daniel waited at the altar, his face composed, his eyes shining. He looked like a man receiving a blessing. When he saw me just for a second, his jaw tightened. It was small. Most people would have missed it. I did not. As the ceremony unfolded, my mind slid back to the first time I went to the lake after Anna died. It was winter then. The water was slate gray, unmoving. The cabin smelled like pine cleaner and secrets. Daniel had insisted on coming with me. "I want to help," he said, pressing a hand to his chest. Inside the cabin, I noticed things: a loose railing on the stairs, a rug that bunched in a way that could trip someone, a bruise on Daniel's wrist, yellowed, fading. "Boating accident," he'd said when I asked about Claire. "Storm came up fast. I asked the sheriff about it later." He shrugged. "Happens more than you think." But I thought about Claire, I thought about Anna. I thought about how Daniel always seemed to be the last person with the women he loved when the accidents happened. The pastor asked if anyone had objections. The moment stretched, my heart hammered, I could feel the eyes on my back. This was the part everyone waits for, even if they pretend not to. I did not speak. Not yet, the vows were exchanged. Daniel's voice was steady. Emily's trembled, then grew stronger. When they kissed, the church erupted in applause. I clapped too. I could do that. I could be quiet. For now, the reception was held at a hall overlooking the river. White lights twinkled, glasses clinked. I sat at a table near the wall, sipping ginger ale. Someone made a joke about me switching to the hard stuff later. I smiled again. It was becoming a habit. Daniel moved through the room like a politician. When he reached my table, he leaned down. "Margaret," he said warmly, "I'm so glad you came." "So am I said. "Family is important." His smile flickered. "Emily is lucky to have you." "I know," I said. "She's lucky in many ways." We watched each other. He straightened and moved on. I had been patient my whole life. Patience is what you learn when you raise a child alone after a good man dies too young. It's what you learn when you work two jobs and still show up to school plays. It's what you learn when the world tells you to let things go. But patience has a limit. Mine was shaped like a folded envelope in my purse. I slipped away from the reception and walked toward the river. The night was cool, I breathed it in and felt steadier. I took out my phone and scrolled to a contact I hadn't used in months. Sheriff Collins, I said when he answered. It's Margaret Hale. There was a pause. Yes, ma'am, I'm ready, I said. If you are. Another pause. Where are you? Across from the hall, I said, by the river. He arrived 10 minutes later, his car lights dim. We stood side by side, watching the reflections ripple. You understand, he said carefully, that reopening anything causes trouble. I understand trouble, I said. I've been living with it. I handed him the envelope. This came to me last week, no return address. He opened it under the streetlight. Inside were photographs, a boat, a timestamp, a shadow on the water that didn't belong to a wave. His breath caught. Where did you get these? He asked. I didn't, I said. They got to me. He looked at me, really looked. If this is what I think it is, I said, and there's more. We were interrupted by laughter spilling from the hall. Daniel stepped outside, loosening his tie. He saw us and froze. The moment stretched again, thicker this time. Everything okay? He called. Just fine, I said, enjoying the view. He nodded too quickly and went back inside. Sheriff Collins folded the photos back into the envelope. I can't promise anything, he said, but I won't ignore this. That's all I ask, I said. When I returned to the hall, Emily found me near the cake. Grandma, she said softly. Are you okay? I took her hands. They were warm, alive. I am, I said, and I love you. She smiled, relief flooding her face. I love you too. As the night wore on, I watched Daniel. I watched the way he checked the exits. I watched the way his phone never left his hand. I watched the way he avoided the river facing windows. At midnight, the music slowed. People gathered for the last dance. Emily rested her head on Daniel's shoulder. He looked down at her with something like tenderness, or maybe it was calculation. I had learned not to confuse the two. I stood, my knees aching, my resolve firm. Tomorrow the whispers would get louder. Tomorrow they would say I ruined a wedding, or that I made things up because grief had rotted my mind. Tomorrow the truth would start to breathe. I stepped outside one last time and listened to the river. It carried secrets well, but not forever. I touched the envelope in my purse and felt the shape of what was coming. They could call me whatever they wanted. I was done being quiet. The next morning arrived with a headache that had nothing to do with alcohol. Sunlight pressed through the thin curtains of my motel room, and for a moment I forgot where I was. Then the memories lined up like witnesses waiting their turn. Emily's smile, Daniel's flicker of fear, the envelope heavy with proof. I showered, dressed, and drank coffee that tasted like cardboard. At 9 sharp, my phone rang. Margaret, Sheriff Collins said. His voice was careful. I'm coming by. I sat on the edge of the bed and steadied my breathing. I'll be here. He arrived alone. No siren, no uniform, just a man carrying the weight of decisions. He sat at the small table and spread the photographs out again. In daylight, they were worse, clearer. The timestamp put Claire's boat on the lake at 7:42 p.m. The weather report said calm until after 9. The shadow beside the boat was shaped like a second hull, close enough to touch. There's also this, he said, pulling out a USB drive. Dropped in our night box at 2 in the morning, anonymous. I didn't pretend surprise. What's on it? Phone data, GPS pings. Daniel's phone places him on the lake at the time he claimed he was at home. He rubbed his jaw. We need a warrant to go further. You'll get one, I said. Maybe, he replied. But people don't like reopening old wounds. I know, I said, I have the scars. He looked at me with something like respect. We're also going to need statements, yours obviously, and your daughter's. My chest tightened. Anna's dead. I know, he said gently. I meant about the cabin, about Daniel. I'll tell you everything, I said. I already have. After he left, I called Emily. It rang too long. Hi, Grandma, she said finally. Her voice was bright, brittle. We're heading out for the honeymoon. Can this wait? No, I said. Is don't go? Silence. Then what is this about? Daniel, I said, and Claire and your mother, her breath caught. You promised? I promised to love you, I said. This is me keeping it. Grandma, she said, you're doing it again. Doing what? Seeing patterns that aren't there, she said. Making stories because you can't stand not knowing. I know exactly what I'm doing, I said. I'm trying to save you. She exhaled hard. We're already on the road. Where? I asked. Why does it matter? She snapped, because if you're going to the lake. We're not, she said quickly, too quickly. We're going to the coast. Emily, I said, please? I have to go, she said. Daniel's waiting. The line went dead. I sat with the phone in my hand until my fingers went numb. I thought about all the times Anna had said the same thing. He's waiting. He's outside. He doesn't like to be kept waiting. I drove home instead of back to my apartment. Home was the house Anna grew up in, the one I couldn't sell because every room held a piece of her. I needed familiar walls. I needed to remember who I was before people started calling me names. On my kitchen table sat a box I hadn't opened in months. Inside were Anna's things, her journals, her scarves, the keychain shaped like a lighthouse. I opened her last journal and flipped to the back. A note fell out, yellowed at the edges. If anything happens to me, look at the stairs. My hands shook so badly I had to sit down. I had read those words before and dismissed them as anxiety. Anna had always been dramatic, always half joking, but now the words burned. I drove back to the cabin that afternoon. The road curled through pines, the lake glinting between them. I parked and stood on the porch listening. The place smelled the same, wood and water and something metallic underneath. Inside, the stairs creaked under my weight. I knelt and ran my fingers along the railing. Loose. Worse than before, someone had tried to tighten it, stripped the screws, then left it unstable. I took photos, I measured angles. I noticed something else I'd missed, a faint scuff on the wall at shoulder height like someone had been pushed. My phone buzzed, Sheriff Collins. "We have a warrant," he said, "for Daniel's devices and the cabin." "Good," I said, "I'm here." "I'll send a unit," he said, "don't touch anything else." I didn't. I sat on the floor and cried until my eyes swelled shut. I cried for Anna, for Claire, for Emily. I cried because I had been right and I hated that. The deputies arrived an hour later. They took photos, bagged screws, nodded grimly. One of them, a young woman with kind eyes, squeezed my shoulder. "You did good," she said. That night my phone rang again. Daniel's name lit up the screen. I answered. "Margaret," he said, voice tight. "Why are the police at my place?" "I imagine because they're doing their jobs," I said. "You had no right," he snapped. "You're trying to ruin my life." "You did that yourself," I said. There was a pause. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know you don't like to be questioned," I said. "I know you don't like losing control." His breath was audible now. "Stay out of this." "I can't," I said. "You married my granddaughter." "She chose me," he said. "Despite you?" "Not knowing," I said. "That's not choosing." "You're sick," he hissed. "Everyone says so." "They always do," I said, "right before the truth comes out." He hung up. 2 days passed in a blur of statements and waiting. Emily didn't answer my calls. News traveled fast in a small town. The whispers sharpened. At the grocery store, a woman leaned toward her friend and said, "That's her, the crazy one?" I paid for my bread and walked out with my head high. On the third day, Sheriff Collins came by again. He looked tired. "We found something," he said. I braced myself. "Daniel deleted messages," he said, "but he didn't erase them completely." There were texts to Claire the night she died, arguments, threats, he swallowed, and a voicemail from Anna, saved on his phone, time-stamped an hour before her fall. My heart hammered. What did it say? She said she was scared, he said, that she wanted to leave, that he scared her. I closed my eyes. Emily needs to hear this. "We can't release it yet," he said, "but we're bringing Daniel in for questioning." "Will you keep him?" I asked. "We'll try," he said, "but we need Emily safe." I didn't wait. I drove to their house, my pulse roaring. I knocked until my knuckles hurt. Emily opened the door, eyes red. Daniel stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder. "What is she doing here?" he demanded. "I need to talk to Emily alone," I said. "No," he said. "Anything you have to say, you can say in front of me." "Emily," I said softly, "please." She looked between us, torn. "Daniel," he tightened his grip. "She's manipulating you." I stepped closer. "Take your hand off her." His eyes flashed. "You don't get to tell me." "Now," I said. Something in my voice cut through him. He released her. "Emily," I said, "there's a voicemail from your mother." Her face went white. "What?" "On Daniel's phone," I said. "She was scared. She wanted to leave." "That's a lie," Daniel said. "She was unstable." "I have pictures," I said, "of the stairs, of the lake, and the sheriff has the rest." Emily's knees buckled. I caught her. She sobbed into my shoulder, years collapsing into minutes. Sirens wailed outside. Daniel bolted for the back door. Deputies flooded in. They took him down hard, cuffs snapping shut. He shouted as they dragged him past us. "You'll regret this." I held Emily as she shook. "I'm here," I whispered. "I've got you." At the station, Emily listened to the voicemail. Her scream echoed down the hall. I held her hand through it, through the anger, through the disbelief, through the awful clarity. Charges came quickly. Not fast enough to erase the damage, but fast enough to stop him. Claire's case reopened. Anna's death reclassified. The town buzzed with shock. They didn't call me crazy anymore. They called me brave. I didn't correct them. Bravery is just fear that keeps moving. Emily came home with me. We cooked soup and talked late into the night. She asked me why I didn't push harder sooner. "I tried," I said, "but sometimes people have to see it themselves." She nodded, eyes hollow. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you." "I know," I said. "I'm sorry you had to." As weeks passed, the truth settled in like dust after a storm. Court dates loomed, reporters called. I ignored them. I focused on Emily, on teaching her how to listen to the quiet voice inside that says something isn't right. One afternoon, she found me in the garden, my hands in the dirt. "Grandma," she said, "they want you to testify." "I will," I said. "Are you scared?" she asked. I looked at the sky, the clouds drifting. "I was scared when I stayed silent," I said. "This feels lighter." The night before the hearing, I sat at my kitchen table and opened the envelope one last time. I traced the edges of the photographs. I thought about the river and the lake and all the places secrets hide. They had underestimated me. They had counted on my grief to keep me small. Tomorrow I would stand in a room and tell the truth in my own voice. And that would be enough to begin the end. The courthouse smelled like old paper and polish, the kind of place that absorbs voices and never gives them back. I arrived early, my purse heavy with memories and documents, my spine straight because I refused to bend anymore. Emily sat beside me, her hand threaded through mine. She wore a simple dress, no jewelry, her face pale but resolute. Daniel Brooks sat at the defense table. He looked smaller without his wedding suit, his confidence shaved down to something brittle. When he glanced at me, his eyes burned with something close to hatred. I met his gaze and held it. I had spent too many years looking away. When they called my name, my knees protested, but I stood. The oath felt sacred, not because of God or law, but because it was the first time anyone had formally asked me to tell my story. I'm Margaret Hale, I began. My voice was steady. I am the mother of Anna Hale and the grandmother of Emily Brooks. Daniel flinched at the name. I told them about Anna, about her laugh, her stubborn kindness, her tendency to see the best in people. I told them about the call from the cabin, the stairs, the note in her journal. I told them about Claire, about the lake, about the photographs that arrived without explanation. I did not embellish, I did not soften anything. The prosecutor played the voicemail. Anna's voice filled the room, thin with fear. Emily sobbed openly. I kept my eyes on the jury, on the faces that were changing as the truth took shape. When Daniel's lawyer stood to cross examine me, he tried to rattle me. He asked about my grief, my supposed drinking, my fixation. Mrs. Hale, he said, isn't it true that you struggled after your daughter's death? I struggled, I said. I did not imagine. Isn't it possible, he pressed, that you connected unrelated events because you needed someone to blame? I leaned forward. It's possible, I said, to ignore patterns when they're inconvenient. I chose not to. He asked about the whispers, about my reputation. I shrugged. People often dismiss women when they speak up, I said, especially older women. The judge allowed it. The jury listened. When Daniel took the stand, he unraveled slowly. His answers contradicted the data, the messages, the witnesses. His mask slipped when the prosecutor showed the GPS logs. It shattered when confronted with the railing screws, stripped and replaced. In the end, he looked at Emily, his voice breaking. I loved you. Emily stood. You don't get to say that, she said. The judge banged the gavel, but the damage was done. The verdict came on a Thursday afternoon. Guilty on all counts. I didn't feel triumph. I felt release, like a door opening after years in a locked room. Outside the courthouse, cameras waited. I walked past them. Emily squeezed my hand. Thank you, she whispered. For what? I asked. For not letting them silence you, she said. Life did not snap back into place. It rearranged itself slowly. Emily stayed with me while she healed. We went to therapy together. We learned the language of boundaries and trust. She went back to school. She laughed again, cautiously at first. I visited the lake once more, alone this time. The water was calm. I spoke Anna's name out loud and felt it carry across the surface. I kept my promise, I said. The wind answered. People stopped calling me crazy. Some apologized. Some didn't. It mattered less than I thought it would. What mattered was that Emily slept through the night. What mattered was that other women wrote to me, saying my story helped them listen to their instincts. I am not a hero. I am a mother who refused to let the truth drown. They can call me whatever they want. I know who I am, and I will never be quiet again.